Good afternoon, this is Motorcycle Mentor, this is episode 2. This week we're just going to do a basic check, inspection of your motorcycle ride, make sure everything's in reasonable fettle. We won't be covering any adjustments, just a check over, make sure everything's okay. So the first thing we're going to do is check the tyres. Right, tyres. Tread. Make sure that there's at least a couple of millimetres. These are deep. They're a quarter of an inch or more, 5/16 of an inch deep, so they're good. What's that in millimetres? 5/16. Don't know. 8 or 9. Check the sidewall. Make sure there's no cracking. Older tyres will crack, which means they're done. If you have cracks in the sidewalls, it's time to get rid of the tyre. These are good. I know these are new tyres, so they're actually fine. And while you're at it, check for nails. It's amazing how long you can have a nail in your tyre and not notice it. You just think you're losing pressure every so often, but this tyre's in good shape. There's no nails in there at all. Normally you'll see little heads. It's hard to tell sometimes because they get so buried. But this one looks good. I mean, if you have a nail in the tyre, it won't necessarily go down straight away, but you might have a slow leak, which will get worse over time. The front tyre, I've got this bike up on a jack because it's a modern Hinckley, what they refer to as a Triumph, even though it actually isn't. It's a Hinckley product, and they sell centre stands. They have the mount for it. The centre stand is an optional extra, which to me is ludicrous. It's a bit like selling mufflers as an optional extra. It's an essential part of the motorcycle as far as I'm concerned, but on these they don't. They just sell it as an option. So the front tyre, I've already checked this one over. It's good. The tread's good. The sidewalls are good. They're not compromised. They're not scraped. There's no nails in it. They match. They're both the same brand, which is good because it's not the end of the world to mix them, but I don't like doing that. It's just good practice to make sure you keep the same brand front and back. Brake fluid. I'm going to get my the flashlight stopped working, I think, but let's see if I can make it work again. Yes, brake fluid. And you can see in there, in the sight glass, you can just make out the fluid there. It's a little on the low side. So as I'm wobbling it, it's just flickering around there. To top it up, you've got to take those 2 screws up, but we'll cover that next time. This is just a prelim check. Same on the back. Because this bike has a hydraulic brakes at the back and at the front, which is common these days. There's also a master cylinder which holds the brake fluid, and as you can see, that's about mid-level there, which is fine because the pads are slightly worn. While we're at it, it never hurts to check the pads. Check the rotors, make sure there's no scoring, because if the pads are worn out, you get metal to metal contact and you'll wear away the rotors. And on this bike, I can show you where it has happened in the past. You see here, look, the damage done to the rotor. Look, there's some really bad ridging going on there. Fortunately, this one has got new pads. It probably should have had a new rotor as well, or had the rotor skimmed, but it hasn't had. It's not the end of the world. You can do that. It'll just wear the pads out faster. And the pads themselves, it's hard to show you on the bike, but you need to check them to make sure you have material. Maybe I can on this one quickly. So if I shine. And yeah, there's loads of material on that. I don't know if you can see there's a metal backplate and there's material on the front. Between the backplate and the rotor, there's a section of friction material, which is what you're looking for, and you want it to be at least 3 or 4 millimeters thick. And I'm going to show you a brake pad here that shows you. So this is the metal backplate. That's the friction material. When it's on the bike, you're looking for this part here to be a minimum of about 3 millimeters. Any less than that, they want to be changed. If you have no friction material and you're down to bare metal, then they definitely have to be changed. No ifs, ands or buts. They won't work and they'll destroy the rotor. Engine oil. I'm gonna show you on a different bike because this is on a stand, as I say, it's on a jack, and I can't level it. But the idea is, this bike, if it was level, we could check the engine oil. If it had a centre stand and it was on level ground, we could check the engine oil. I've got this bike raised up at the moment. If it was on the ground, I could just tilt it over and check the engine oil. But I'm going to show you on this one. That's the sight class there, and you can just see the oil, and it's on the top mark there. Oil's clean. That's the other thing. If you can see the oil and it looks sort of amber coloured as opposed to jet black, then that's a good sign. And if it's up like that, midpoint to high point is good. You don't want too much, and you don't want it to be too low. I levelled this bike to make sure I could check it. This is the essential part. The bike has to be absolutely level. You can see I've got a jack on that side and a block of wood on that side, and it's just holding this bike absolutely upright. The last thing to check is the chain sprockets. And this is the newest chain. It's actually in really great shape. You can see it's a nice gold colour. It's an O-ring chain. You can tell because there's O-rings between the links and the side plates, which is good. They last a lot longer than the old-fashioned style non-O-ring chains. Basically, they seal in grease, and the O-rings are a seal. So the chain's good. The chain tension. Let's see if I can see that. Yep, that chain tension's perfect. You want about an inch of chain tension. You check it off the stand, and you check it while you're sitting on it. What you don't want it to be too loose. This is good. If it's too loose and it's hanging right down, it'll cause jerky transmission, and it'll wear the sprockets out. If it's too tight, you'll destroy the transmission. You'll cause oil leaks. But this is perfect. So what you need to do is check it on the centre stand to get about an inch and a half of clearance. Then take it off the centre stand, sit on the bike, and if you can lean over and just make sure you've got a little bit of slack in there, then you're good. And the other thing too is always look for high spots, because quite often you'll find a chain that will have tight spots because of eccentricities in the sprockets and because of different wear rates in the chain. So find the point at where it's tightest. You don't want it to be too obvious, because if it's too obvious then it's time for a new chain, because it means it's worn badly, but you're bound to get a little bit. This bike actually is pretty good. I checked it this morning and I couldn't see any tight spots. So that chain's good, and the sprockets are good. Always worth checking the sprockets. My flashlight's just quit again. Check the sprockets. You can see down there, look, just check the teeth, make sure they're not hooked. The point of the teeth should be pretty much as symmetrical as you can picture. If you get hooking on one side, so if the teeth look like they're bent over at an angle on all of them, then that means that your sprocket's worn out. And it's time to change both rear and front sprocket and the chain, all three of them at once. You don't change just one component in that situation. So it's chains, fork seals. We covered the fork seals. I think we covered the fork seals. Looking for wear in the fork seals. Make sure we've got no pitting, no leakage there, because if you get leakage there, it'll dribble down the fork and onto the brake caliper and onto the brake rotor, which you really don't want, as well as the fact you don't have any oil in your forks, which affects the damping. So it's always good to just check the fork seals. You normally get some, you'll get like black scurf rings of congealed oil and dust. Let's get this camera on there. Congealed oil and dust on there. And you'll see that you get oily dust all down here. And the brake caliper will be covered in it. I had that on the bike recently. It was just covered everywhere. Even the front of the engine was covered in it. So just check those. Always worth doing once a month. And that's basically it. Make sure, never hurts to make sure your lights and everything are working. So I normally just check. You can see in the distance there, I think, from the garage wall, but rear light's working. Stop light. They should work from the front and back levers on more modern bikes. On the older ones they didn't. Turn signals. You can hear them clicking, so that's good. They're all working. Horn. And that's pretty much it. Oh, one more thing. I normally check the clutch lever. What you want here is right here, look. That's slack, and that's what you want. Then it starts to disengage. There's perhaps a little bit too much slack there. I prefer it just a fraction more snug than that, so I might just... I wasn't going to adjust that, but I thought it's on here now. That's perfect. You don't want... There has to be a bit of slack. If you don't have any slack at all, the clutch will slip and you'll wear it out. And also it'll wear out the disengaging mechanism, the bearing or whatever they use to disengage the clutch plates. So slack is vital, but not too much, because if there's too much then you won't be able to disengage the clutch to stick it in gear. Just check for nuts, fasteners, bolts coming out. It's amazing how often I've seen bikes with a bolt halfway out of the shock absorber mount or a footrest hanging off or something like that. But these are all good. Everything's in good shape here. Let's turn the ignition off. And that's basically it for episode 2 of Motorcycle Mentor. So next week we'll deal with something more specific. Don't know what yet. Maybe adjusting the chain or maybe topping up the brakes. But I'll think about it next week. Probably the more vital one of the two. I'll look into it. Thank you for watching. Speak to you next week.